Good morning, everybody, and welcome to those of you that are watching remotely as well. Greetings. I hope you're all feeling good today. Today we've got a really great opportunity to bring together different parts of the sector. So it's a real privilege to have sales agents, exhibitors, distributors, producers, and of course all of you in the room. We really want this session to be as interactive as possible, so do ask questions. We've also got sales agents that are here at the front that might want to add to the contributions that are done on the panel. I think what's exciting about this is obviously us exhibitors have got a very granular view of things. We have very localized knowledge. We're on the front line of audiences. But I'm hoping what can come out of this conversation is also to pair that up with what sales agents are able to bring, which is a much more global view of things, of seeing how their titles are performing across multiple territories, and give us some insights into some of the trends that they're noticing. So I'm Maddie Probst. I manage a cinema in Bristol called The Watersheds and work with sales agents on various touring programs as well. And I'm the Vice President of Europa Cinemas. And I'm going to ask everybody to briefly introduce themselves and also tell us a little bit about how COVID changed your business. We don't want to dwell too much on the COVID year and a half, but perhaps like one thing that you think you're going to keep with you going forwards. And we'll start with you, Katarzyna.
Apart from home office.
Apart from home office, yeah.
It's a keeper. My name is Katarzyna Siniarska. I work for New Europa Film Sales. I've been there for 10 years now, starting as one of the two people that kind of built the company. Now I'm a head of sales and a partner at the company. Yesterday I was elected Europa's international co-president together with Alice Ledo from Corvez. So that's my new function starting today. And yes, you might know some of our films that were released recently. This year in Cannes we had an Icelandic title called Lamb that might be going to your cinemas shortly, I hope. In the previous years we handled Oscar-nominated Corpus Christi and our whole history with being like a proper sales company started with Icelandic title Rams. That was also quite successful at some point, and it kind of changed the game for us. As for what happened over the last years, I think we're only catching up with the crisis on our level of activity, being where we are in the food chain, and so I would say we were not that harmed yet, but it's coming because we know that distributors, the cinemas, that they have full lineups, and there's simply no space for the films that we want to launch next year. I think the major issue that we discuss is also streamers coming on board, more and more projects, so the projects are disappearing from the market even before we can access them. Okay. So that would be the thing for me to like the major thing that is a game changer for us.
Yeah, I think there's been a real acceleration of things that we were noticing were happening anyway, and it's just being condensed both for cinemas and sales agents. And we're going to go over to you, Cristina.
My name is Cristina. This one?
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Cristina, and I founded Nitrato Films, a film distributor, almost 10 years ago. with my partner, Americo, and then we realized that we needed a space to show our own titles. And we reopened an old cinema in Oporto, downtown, Cinema Trindade, 4 years ago. It has 2 screens, and we show a very diverse programming between our own titles and all distributors, Portuguese distributors' titles as well, art house and independent, and we have a very accurate curation, I think, between classics, retrospectives. We do also a lot of special screenings. So we needed this space just like because we also run a film festival, a Luso-Brazilian film festival. So we have a lot of Brazilian titles in our catalog, not only, but we have a lot of Brazilian titles. And we wanted to run our cinema just like almost a film festival. So we used to play saying that we have a film festival every week happening in our cinema. About COVID and how it affected us, of course, for the cinema it was terrible because we have 2 lockdowns and we have to face it. In a time, the first one was most difficult one because at the first reopening there was no films in the distribution to feed our cinema. So that was a great thing that we have our own catalog. So we could manage in a better way to face the crisis with this with our own catalog, because we have the freedom to have a more attractive programming, and we were not only
you weren't reliant on
on the releases that were not happening, because distributors were all of them afraid, of course. The second reopening was very good for us. I think people were, and our public were willing to come back, of course, so it was good. And I think now, of course, I think things were changing before COVID. So, and I can give you the example that we were showing, for example, a platform production, Rome from Alfonso Cuarón. Yeah. We released it before COVID, and it was very good for us. So I think when we have good titles to release it, and we have, of course, a good promotion, it was okay, and it was very good. So for now, I think the main difference before COVID and this day, and of course I'm talking about Portugal, where we can now sit 100% the seats at the cinemas. So the main difference now is that people have to wear masks in the room. So I don't feel any, for now at least, and I think no one can.
Huge surge of films that are coming into the market, and I think it doesn't just affect independents, but also at the more commercial end of the spectrum, the kind of situations with studio films and the decisions that were made over the COVID periods is a bit of a wake-up call about that reliance on certain products and us having to sort of think through what is our business model. And with the platform, whilst it's great, you were able to access Roma, a lot of cinemas weren't. So there's also that question about, you know, where are the films coming from, and will we have access as the theatrical window? So we're going to move over to the award-winning Entrepreneur of the Year 2020, who got his award yesterday, Ramiro. Congratulations once again. Can we just give him a hand? Who has wears many hats.
Bueno, no sé si se me escucha. Así. Voy a hablar en español ya que...
As we have interpretation today, and it's easier for me. I'm an exhibitor, distributor. In October 2019, I reopened a cinema at Ferrol, a municipality of 50,000 inhabitants in the northwest of Spain, in Galicia. That was before lockdown, and before that I was reconciling this with a project to build up a new cinema room with library, post-production labs at Santiago de Compostela called Numax. I started ideating it in 2013. We opened in 2015 with a staff of five people, and since last February, where I ceased to belong to it, we were 14 people working at Numax. Regarding exhibition, curiously enough, during COVID times, during lockdown, it was a spur, a stimulus, so that exhibitors we are linked to the Europa cinemas in a network in Spain. It's quite hard to find the time to sit down together and to work, to discuss our everyday problems or how to face the future in these uncertain times. I must say that this year and a half has been quite fruitful, because we created a association called Promio. I chair it. We represent currently 21 film theaters, and similarly in the field of distributions, we have created an original version at house film distributors called Proxima, taking advantage of this newly created space so as to make the most and take advantage of what the good things that this terrible thing has meant. I mean, the pandemic. At Numax, I've been working, I worked until 2019, and from then on, I've been working independently. The company is called Atalante. We have a film at competition at the festival or Mota. It will be screened today, so hopefully you'll be able to view it if you have the time tonight, this evening. And regarding immediate challenges, well, it's a bit strange. This is a very uncertain moment in Spain. I mean, I don't know whether it was the only country, but we were one of the few countries that kept the cinemas open over the pandemic. I don't know whether it was a good or a bad decision. Ultimately, that will depend on the size or the magnitude of cinemas, of cinema rooms for the small ones. For the first time, we got subsidies, grants from this state-owned Instituto de Cinematografía. I remind you that in Spain there has never been any financial support to our sector. This is one of the main objectives of our Promio association. Maybe developed a identifying brand with certain contents that are screened and showed on our rooms, so that this is acknowledged and recognized by the public authorities. And the fact that we kept our cinema rooms open, and we are a nearly federal state with 17 autonomous communities or several territories, and each region decided to keep the cinema rooms open, others closed. In Catalonia, some of them were open, others not. So it was really difficult to agree on how to design campaigns, these complicated premieres. At some point, I had two different titles. I had one premiere at the 13th of March. The very first day they closed down, they locked down, so we feel a great deal of suffocation, even of uncertainty. There are millions of films that are being released just at the same time. Everything is upside down, really. There is lack of order, but hopefully next year things will come back to normal gradually. We are not suffering equally. In my specific case, I'm leading a project. It has been recently created. We are renewing the system for ticket sales. We are expanding the original version screenings, European cinema at a small city that wasn't so much accustomed to this type of art house independent cinema. Within some months, we multiplied by 3 audiences and attendance, and however, I didn't have enough time, or just because to do what I wanted to do, because I'm devoting my time to several things and wear several hats. As Madeleine said before, we want the general audience to perceive, to be aware, as I say, that there is a wide offer, so that they feel identified, or they feel a sense of belonging to with this project, and that they feel part of the community. We local cinemas need to connect with the people. This is one of my main aims when defining a local cinema room. First of all, connecting and creating, current events. A municipality or a city, a town without a cinema room is totally disconnecting with what's going on in the country, in the rest of the world. Cinema rooms are just, cannot be replaced by anything else. This is my full conviction. And regarding identity of cinemas itself and the role it plays in culture, in our cosmovision. So
it does feel like a turning point for Spain with the Premier Network. There's a sense of, the project we had presented earlier as well about that collaboration that's happening across the sector in Spain, which is something that perhaps wasn't there so much before the COVID. So I think as an outsider, for me, that's what I've noticed in Spain, that there's some good things happening in terms of connectivity.
Sí.
And we've got a special extra guest. Thank you, Frédéric, for stepping in at the last moment. We did feel it was good to have two sales agents on the panel to get different perspectives. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more from what you do and your experience post-COVID, what you're taking away from it.
Good morning. I'm the last minute guest. I'm the founder and the manager of Urban Distribution International. This is what I'm here for. I'm also a board member of Europa International. I have different hats as well. I have another company dedicated to documentary for sales. It's Reservoir Dogs. And I'm a distributor in France as well. And I'm a producer. We are director-driven companies. In Cannes this year, we had La Civile, shot in Mexico, but Belgium, but whatever. So we do the same kind of film of Nef and as per the pandemic, I think, it just speeded up a process that was already triggered before.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a catastrophe for us because, when the cinema are just closed and the lockdown is everywhere, you can't really make sales, but it was not that difficult to wait until now, and hopefully we won't go back to lockdown. But I think the market has changed a lot the past 10 years. Luckily, I was doing this job maybe like 20 years before, when it was the golden years, and it was just fantastic. I mean, the films we have today, we would have made so much money with it, and people used to go to cinema and watch them, and it was like completely different, of course. And when I started my company 17 years ago, people told me, "Oh, it's the end of this market. I mean, it's super risky to do that." But at the time, it was again like so beautiful and so easy. I couldn't expect it would be so different 10 years after. So yeah, I think I think the digital has changed a lot. The way people see films, the way they buy films, it's different. Maybe the profile of the audience is different as well. So even before the pandemic, I think we're already facing some difficulties, and I've been part of panel like this one to discuss about the future of cinema. So I think it has just speed up the process. And since we didn't know what to do, I mean, last year, because I mean, on top, when you're a distributor and you really have nothing to do, sales is different because you can rely on the streamers. I mean, on paper you can, in theory you can, but in the real world you can't. I mean, they don't care a lot for independent cinema. But we had time, and we decided to launch our own platform in France. And it works a bit, I must say. Like, I was surprised because I wouldn't say we have a success, but we don't do a lot. You know, we have like 80, maybe 90 films today. And it was just a test. I'm just thinking of developing it. So what I believe is there is some room, some space for the films we defend, the art house cinema. Because if we observe and if we see that people mostly watch series on Netflix and Amazon and Apple and all the new players, I really believe that for cinema there is a space in Europe for films people want to see. The problem we have is the audience for our films is quite old. I mean, when we do a premiere, an avant-premiere, you can see like all the white head in the room, and it's obvious. I mean, that the people who are interested in like art house cinema, they are quite old, like over 50 and maybe 60 sometimes. So I think they were the people who suffered the most the last 15 months as well. And we know we need them. The thing is, in France, for instance, the audience is not coming back. I mean, for like big like Hollywood movies, it works a lot. I think it's like plus 30%. But for the films we defend, it's more like minus 40%. So my wonder now is like, did we broke the toy, or is it coming back like step by step, and like maybe in a year it will be just like before, meaning decreasing, of course, but like before. That's my wonder.
And you talk a little bit about your relationship with streamers. Could you expand a little bit? I mean, I know it's hard to talk about individual titles, perhaps, but you know, this is something that this room is really interested in, to see whether are you noticing shifts? Is your business model now, can it be reliant on some of the income that you're getting from streamers, or are you still seeing the theatrical window as like your main thing? And you know, we're not too sensitive. We can hear. We want to hear the real thing.
I can do the introduction because I'm
Great,
like,
Katarzyna. Yeah.
So I would say it was very true what Frédéric said, that the kind of films that we are selling, so the art house, author-driven, festival-winning films, are not exactly the kind of films that the streamers are following. On the other hand, obviously, there is a little bit, I would say that coming back to what I briefly mentioned in the beginning, it's more a shift about like films stop being available before they're produced, so before
Yeah.
they come even into our hands. So the streamer is trying to increase their IP base basically through relations with producers directly. So this is one thing. Obviously, we were able to manage to
Which is
make some.
this is something that's affecting all of us because
Yeah, basically
then
it's
we
like-
can't access these films.
I think one of the most interesting trends that I noticed over the last 2 years, it was this year during AFM, some bigger distributors from various territories, also Asia, they were asking if we know if there are any kind of packages available at the level they're used to. So the big companies that would like to have films of a certain size, but they're gone to the streamers or to the global players, meaning studios and the like. And suddenly they're afraid that they don't have the capacity to operate at the same level that they used to.
Yeah.
Even if the audiences are there. I mean, we will not know that because this kind of films, there's maybe stop being released in cinemas. So it's a question whether there's gonna be a polarization of like big studio films in the cinemas and the small niche films produced at a lower cost and having this kind of audience like your cinemas has, especially now that I think I really loved what you said, that you're very flexible with the programming, and I think that was also the trends that I was observing so much among the distributors too, how they're flexible with their marketing campaigns, with the P&As. Sometimes they can decrease it, but work in a very smart way to reach different kind of audiences who are, like Ramiro said, they're very fragmented, especially when you have this kind of localized lockdowns like you have in Spain, and you cannot do a unified campaign throughout the country. So this is also something that's important to remember about. But I don't know, it's like what the and on the other hand, we have the emergence of like loads and loads of local platforms, festivals trying to expand also into being providers of curated content.
And does that help, or is that sort of parasite programming?
Well, each time you have to try and see if this is a feasible.
Is it worth it?
Yeah, is it even worth to invest into providing the materials, legal work, whatever? Because it's really difficult to tell what their subscriber base is, and
There's no data.
yeah, at some point it's just like workload and not really so much revenues coming in.
Yeah, and Frédéric, you said you had a couple of successes. So, are you starting to see the templates or the models evolving for some of your smaller titles, with a balance of perhaps theatrical income and VOD income, and what is that looking like for you?
But it's hard for me because I'm a distributor and a sales agent, so there are two different perspectives, and
Sure.
and I just before I wanted to say about the streamers. At the beginning, when they started, they were like not supporting us, but they were like very much interested in films, so they could even like buy films that were just selected in Toronto, or I think they bought films from like most of the companies with super high prices, something which is so different from what we could expect for the same movies. And the sustainability of the company we have relies on maybe sometimes one big deal a year. So so when you do, like we did recently a deal with Disney for a film in Latin America, it's a lot of money, and it's insane in a way. But they so far I think they don't care about cinema. So what happened at the beginning, I mean, I think it's over. I think they focus a lot on production, like original, Amazon, Netflix, so on. But for feature films, it doesn't work. I mean, they keep on producing Jane Campion or Sorrentino just for the sake of having a film in the contest of the Oscar, so they can sometimes maybe hopefully get an Oscar, which is not the case so far. I mean, for best film. So I think now it's more like the series versus the films, and the films they have to be made for theaters. it's very key for me. And what I observed, like even before the lockdown, when you release a film and you create an event with a film, meaning not all the films can do it. I mean, you can have a film with a cast and you rely on the filmmaker, the cast and everything to just make Q&A and everything. But sometimes you have films with just a subject and association, NGO supporting in, and you can create like in a country, which we did for some films, like you can have like 200 events and it's more like a live show in a way, you know, so you're not like when you work with cinema, you work with association people invested for, you know, in the topic, committed in what you do, and doing this, you know, like 200 cinemas in France, it's a lot actually to do, and it works. I mean, you can make money, and when you have a success with those kind of films, and you go to like VOD platforms, I mean, like Film in here, which is quite successful, or Mobi in the UK, and more, and Universiné in France, for instance. I mean, you can see how you can create value, but only with cinema releases. I mean, you can't create value with putting something on a website. I mean, it's not working at all. Even for SVOD, or I mean, you need to first, in my opinion, release the film in a cinema because you have the press. There's no press for like a film like popping up on Netflix. So you have press for cinema, and then you can try to save money, to make money, potentially profits with different media. TV is still, depending on the country, it's still like a partner, but it's decreasing. So maybe there is something to do, but we can't in France do day and date. But I strongly believe that if you can make a proper release, get the press, and you can get like an amazing press, and shortly show the film on VOD, because not everyone have a cinema with your film around. I think it could be a sustainable business model.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up Mubi, who obviously have a really big presence in the UK, where I'm based, because, you know, they're a streamer essentially, but it's interesting to see that they are putting so much energy into theatrical now, which started with their kind of Mubi Go initiative, which is kind of bringing their cinephile community to cinemas like my cinema. And during the COVID time, did all these kind of partnerships with cinemas. So rather than cinemas creating their own platforms, we kind of collaborated with them. And now they're really, you know, bringing a lot of really strong titles into the UK and doing well, I think, on VOD. I mean, we don't have all the numbers, but so that kind of traditional idea of, you know, the theatrical creating noise, maybe the windows is less relevant now. But the actual visibility and the energy and the engagement that goes into a physical release is still something that stays. So it's quite good to hear that. Do you agree with this, Katarzyna? Just to get a different...
not maybe 100%.
Yeah.
I don't know, tiny things like the biggest film portal, like the website about films in Poland. When you have the menu, the cinema repertoire was on top. Now it's at the bottom, and on top it's coverage of the Netflix and streamers releases. So I wouldn't say the press is not interested in covering this. It's still crucial for the kind of films we're dealing with, we're handling, but on the other hand, it's not that the interest is not there, and I think it's one of the issues too, that some of the focus of we also discussed it among Europa International, also of the trades, is going to the films released by the streamers and their original created content, rather than covering the reviews of the films that are in festivals, which is becoming a major issue for us.
Yeah, or hijacking festivals so that the coverage is actually about the opening film, which happens to be a Netflix film. So yeah, I mean, we're noticing that in the UK definitely, that there's a shift with the press. That was true maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and now things are changing a little bit. I'm interested from everybody to hear a little bit about where you see the future for cinema, essentially. Within, maybe think about your own business models. I mean, because you must be doing the maths and thinking, well, how do I make this work? So you talked about your catalogue being useful during the lockdown. So is that something you're thinking about when you're making acquisitions? What is my model in the future?
I wouldn't. I would say that what you said before is that we are still in this kind of transition period, and we really don't know. It's hard to tell whether we should focus on just putting up a good fight to keep the current model, or find ways to pivot and make some space for ourselves in collaboration with the streamers as like the test makers, or managing talents, like find a place in the food chain that suits the company. But in the context of the whole ecosystem, I think we need like few more calm months where people start thinking about going to cinemas like a habit again, which is easy, and you don't have to prepare as for the war to go to the cinema with the equipment and somewhere at the back of your head the possible threats when you're going with kids, or I don't know. It's like it has to be easy again for us to be able to see whether people are really going back to the cinemas. It's like across different territories, it's also different. In those countries which has younger audiences, the demographics are a little bit different. People are still going to the cinema, and it's like the results are completely. I mean, it's like you cannot compare between the countries sometimes. But it's been, I don't know. For me, I would also like to ask some questions to the exhibitors, because I know that, for instance, my friend who's releasing the Golden Bear from this year and Palme d'Or, she has real issues with programming it in Polish cinemas. Like nobody wants those films, and they're filled with commercial. Even Europa cinemas are filled with commercial content, and so. Speaking about collaboration, how should we address that? Is it part of somehow our mission to still have those kind of films in a regular repertoire, or we have to focus on surviving, because this is like a thin balance between these two?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. There's a danger that in a way with COVID, there is a sort of excuse from cinemas to say, well, we need to get people back in, therefore we're going to show the Bond film, we're going to show, which is part of the mix for a lot of organizations. But what does that do to the future ecosystem if we're not able to commit to making those films work? And I mean, obviously you can contribute from your side, so you're operating almost as a sort of year-round festival. So is that the model? Cinemas really getting behind both the titles that are being released, that are winning awards and so on, and then also collaborating with sales agents? Or is there just a problem with too many films coming out, and there needs to be a sanity check about how much you can fit into the theatrical window?
As far as concerned, to me, I think there are too many films, of course, but if we have a programming that makes sense, we can balance between, and of course we need those titles to survive, but we can balance between both. And for example, and I think nobody can say what's going to happen now. I think it's too early to say that, even and I don't think that it will be a threat. We can collaborate and we can live with that. And I agree with Frédéric when he said that there's a big difference between series and films still needed the theatrical release, although at least in Portugal, press is with an eye on the platforms also, and they also write about films that only released in the platforms, but we can balance between both, and we have those titles, winning titles, and European titles, mainly because at our cinema, at least, we only mainly European titles and all over the world. But for us now, I think they will keep surviving as well. This kind of model theatrically, and people will go together to the cinema again. And maybe today I'm happy because yesterday I was releasing a film. It was sold out, so, and we have 2 European titles doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Among with Brazilian titles in between the programming, and the cinema going is beginning, and it's going to back to normal, I think.
Yeah, and Ramiro, I'm interested in bringing you in with your kind of network hat on, because I think, the point Katarzyna is making about our cinema's actually going to get behind some of those films that they're buying, that you're buying, and the importance of networks in a way in, obviously, if you have a bit of public funding as well, you can create real incentives. Europa Cinemas is one of them, but also national incentives can perhaps make a difference to saying, okay, there's the appeal of those very commercial titles that will just bring you an audience without you doing much work at all, because the marketing spend is so huge. But with those smaller titles, can cinemas kind of work together to really back those distributors and sales agents that are trying to take a bit of a risk?
Bueno, espero que sí. De eso, además, justamente sí que hay. Bueno, esto, en la convocatoria de Collaborate to Innovate, por ejemplo, sí ha habido 3 proyectos españoles.
Which also work in this sense, which is not just promo, it's groups of exhibitors. We have created projects which have to do with the presence of the team of the films and going in the cinemas when the films are shown, and I think it is very interesting. And with regards of what you were talking about before, I don't think it's going to be very possible that the release of films in cinemas is going to be the starting point of films. Maybe it is going to change, but philosophically, or the feeling that you get from it, there is no other way in which a film is going to be seen individually or in a group, which has been created that way, so that to see it from beginning to end without pausing the film, without getting up, without any distractions whatsoever. So in TVs and any platforms, films are shown in a way which are not shown in the way that they were thought initially to be shared. So all the productions and even in platforms, well, they're always asking for more and more. So it seems like it's not enough to see one thing just once. It is true that you are also always fighting to be current, but I also want to think that it is just something that is happening right now. So we have had 18 months of cinemas closed, so it's of course the cultural information about cinemas has been shifted to focus on platforms. But I hope, and I think all of us from the sectors, we have to push for the cinemas to go back to be present in the press. And I think it is a responsibility from the cinemas, from the cinema associations, from distributors, from the whole sector. In order to achieve this.
And Frédéric, did you want to just say a little bit about so what you've created this platform? You know, how are you seeing the future of your company at the moment? I know it's a hard question, but
yeah, I don't know what company, and now the platform was really a test. Well, it was already there, but it was, since we had time, we decided to make it bigger and spend a little money on advertising. When I say like the press has no interest in like a film on a platform, I was talking about like VOD platforms, not like, of course, Amazon and Netflix, they have so much power. And they spend so much money, mostly on series. And you can now see advertising for the upcoming series on the wall of your city in France, which was not the case a year or 2 years ago. But on VOD, which is different, but because there are two systems, and the SVOD is winning the game actually. What's changing, what's shifting is you have now more companies than only Netflix and Amazon. You have new players, so I think at this stage we're in the middle of something, and we don't know and they don't know what they're gonna do.
yeah.
I'm not certain that Netflix will exist in 5 years. I don't know if they're gonna merge. I don't know if the system is working. I think they are losing a lot of money actually, and it's not sustainable at the SVOD today. You can do it when you're Amazon or Apple because you're so bloody rich that you can do whatever you like. You can lose billions of dollars every day. It's not the problem. But my problem is I can't do it. Unfortunately, I don't know how to lose money that much all the time. My bank is not like helping me at all. So I have to create value. And it's something very interesting in today's world. Like, how do you create value? Because what we do, what capitalism is good at, is to use the value, make money with what exists, but you don't create value. Of course, the streamers, they make series, they produce series. But me, what I try to do is to combine this like cinema releases with the profits I can make afterwards on a VOD platform. But it has to be curated a lot, which is the success of Mubi, for instance. What they do, they have a very unique and specific process, and that makes the success of Mubi. But at the same time, it's a limit as well, because if they want to expand, become something different, they have to change the complete model. So what we just noticed is like, okay, when we work on a VOD release in a way, and spend money on it and use what we've done for the release in cinema, sometimes it works. So but we are talking of small money, because when we talk about cinema, we don't say the figures. What the money we make with films is just like nothing for a bigger group, but I'm happy with it because I'm a small company. I have like 12 people working with me, so well, it's France, so it's quite expensive, especially Paris. But we can, we can make it even in the context of this crisis. So yeah, we were surprised to see some films making, I don't know, like 6,000 euros profit, like a documentary, only on our platform. And the film is on the other platforms as well, like Orange, Canal+, and so on. So in the end, you can make like 10,000 for a documentary that no one expected before, because you have a subject, because you have a target, and because we apparently did the good job. So that's something I like to repeat. It takes time, but the good news is what we do for the release in cinema is usable and profitable for what we do on VOD afterwards, which is like today's France, it's like 3 months.
That's fascinating what you're saying. This is the kind of discussions we've been having for the last few days about growth and this obsession with growth, and perhaps that this is a time to look at different kind of models. If you look at things like the donut economy, where it's not necessarily about growing and making huge amounts of money. It's about where you create the added value. And I think that's where what cinemas do in a way in their communities is it's not just about showing the films, it's about creating jobs, it's about bringing your community together, it's about the social impact you're having. And it's great to hear that from someone that's at the other end of the spectrum, that you're also kind of thinking about, well, how can I just make this work on quite a small scale, and maybe small is good.
I just want to concerning that, I just want to add, it's a curiosity, but just to say that, and in the first day I said that it was not only Excel sheets, but for example, we released Dune at our cinema, and after 2 weeks, we took it off to give space to a documentary, a Portuguese documentary. And as you said, for our contribution for Dune, it was 1% maybe. So there was nothing to the, and our contribution for this Portuguese documentary, that is the Metamorphose of the Birds. It's a poetic, very personal documentary. Our contribution, it was really huge for this documentary. So and we could involve our whole community, and I think the key is curation, of course. So so for Excel experts or for the person who only look at the figures, they don't understand why we took Dune out of the after 2 weeks, when was the film that was doing better even at our cinema, but this our kind of decisions.
Yeah, and I think this, just zooming out with my Europa Cinemas hat on, this is something that's being reflected across the network, that for some of the titles that we're talking about that are some of those European titles, the Europa Cinemas network can be sometimes 80% of the box office for those films, or 60%. So remember just how important you are to the life of those films. And sometimes I think we lose sight of that. I want to just quickly open it up in case you had any pressing questions for the panel, or you had some different perspectives, because obviously, as we're saying, we're all living through this at the moment, so we might have different perspectives or experiences that we might want to share. Oh,
I've got a question actually for the sales agents. How can we work together between the sales agents and the cinemas if there is no distribution in between? Am I making sense?
But
there's a revolution now.
But we do. I mean, there are territories where the cinemas are more like standalone organizations, institutions like yours, like curated space, which is driven by the taste of the owner, and sometimes they reach out. It's like cinemas from Benelux or Switzerland or Germany, they go directly to us, and we do something which is like easy, like a non-theatrical screening, like we would collaborate with a festival maybe, and our festival manager is doing all the logistics for that, so it's easy.
Do you think it would be maybe feasible to create subtitles in different languages? Because that's really something difficult for us to pay the subtitles if we need to, get in touch with a distributor or a sales agent, which is not, in our case, Spanish. That's hard.
I don't think it would be possible for us to be responsible for that. It's just like you have to have in mind that we work across all the countries. But on the other hand, whenever we have, a festival premiere in the territory, sometimes they give us the subtitles, and then we make them available at no extra costs if there's a license, if the rights are clear.
And just to add to this, I think, to throw it back to you, one of the ways you can bring costs down and perhaps find ways of bringing the subtitles is to work with other Spanish exhibitors. so that you can be, 10 exhibitors, which is something we've done in the UK, which is a really, really tough market for foreign language films. When we do want to bring a title, we kind of work with another 10 exhibitors, and then it's possible.
It's super small.
Yeah. It's a small release, but we do our best with it.
Yeah, it's tricky because of course we work with cinemas sometimes, but our partners are distributors, so it's tricky to bypass the distributor in a way. I mean, we can do it like from time to time, but it's very key for us to work with people, and you just notice that, okay, when you work with a distribution company, they pay for the subtitling or sometimes the dubbing and everything.
No, but it's only when the film is not sold, obviously. It's that kind of question. So that there's not, just like we're not neglecting anybody
No,
here.
but what's happening sometimes, and it happened to us in the US with Film Forum, when as a cinema, as an exhibitor, you want a film, and if again you're not the only one, it might help a distributor to take the decision of distributing the film as well. I mean, among all the possibilities, the options you have to show a film you like, you can, with other people, say, if you like talk to the distributors, like if you decide to take the film, we will screen it in a cinema. And it happened to me a few times, to have the support of local exhibitors to convince a distributor to buy the film on different level. It happened to me in the US, in more like a specific country in Europe or smaller countries. That's one of the
Switzerland
options.
and Japan is also great. But like this, the cinemas are reaching out. I sold few films to Japan that I would not ever, if not because the cinemas are quite strong there, so they can reach out and make suggestions. And they travel to the festivals. They travel to Cannes, to Berlin. They screen the films, and they do the whole coverage, like the acquisition people from distribution companies. So this is also very much appreciated.
And last option, you can talk to the local festival. I mean, they usually make subtitling, so if and for many films you have festivals showing the film in many countries. So it's in Spain. I mean, I don't know what film you are thinking about, but you can go to the festival and take the subtitling for a cheap fee or for free if you're good.
Yeah, but the bottom line, it's easy. You just reach out to festival manager at the sales company and you ask if this is available for the screening. If it is, it's going to be no issue.
Yeah. And just to pick up on what was just said about the States, I think it's worth looking at models like Janus, for instance, that do they do the distribution. Well, they're kind of like they do the Criterion catalogue, but the way they work with exhibitors has been really interesting. Because they've set it up so that it's extremely easy for exhibitors to work directly, essentially with the catalogue, where all the assets are easily available. But what it's taken to get to that point, I think, is the exhibitors really organising themselves and showing there's a demand for that service, which means it's been developed. Do we have any other questions?
Hi, so I'm a sales agent and I have a question for Cristina. I wanted to know, since you have this double programming, the festival and the more commercial release, what's the proportion of the admissions that you get from the festivals and the proportion of the just the films that are on release worldwide, on a Portuguese level?
Actually, we don't run a festival at our cinema. We host a lot of film festivals, different film festivals, Italian film festivals, French film festivals, and we only release a few commercial, let's say, titles, and we don't usually release the Hollywood titles. But for this example that I was giving about Dune, we decided to release Dune, although it is not a common title in our programming. But we decided, mainly because of the young audience, that I regret to say that we don't do a good job, as I see some of you here. But we have a young audience for this kind of title. So, and Dune was doing. We don't only look to Excel sheets, so we don't have that kind of figures in mind.
I think Sabine meant that she would like to know more about like what's the kind of box office for the festivals is. So is it like a viable option to have it as a part? I think, is it balanced?
Yes, the whole figure at the end, it's good to balance this. So
sorry, I was maybe not clear my question. I understood that you had like the film that are released in Portugal that you program.
Yeah.
But you also have a second programmation where you create festival in your cinema.
I don't create them.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
They already exist in the country, and we host these film festivals. Okay. But also we have our own creation and our own programming. We create our own cycles. Classical cycles. We create
that's my point.
Yes, we create our own retrospectives. We create all of that, and the balance is kind of 50-50 or
so
more or less.
Really,
I don't have that figures so accurate, but maybe more because. This example that I gave to you, we think a lot in this collaboration with the distributors and local distributors. We care a lot with that. So, for us, we represent it as exhibitors. We represent 25%, for example, for a title, and for these big commercial titles, we don't represent almost nothing. So. We think that is an important issue to have in mind when we, of course, we have to pay the bills, and I have to pay it. And but this work that we have to do to find our public, and I think we could manage with this.
I do think it's a great question. It's a great question for all of us to reflect on what is that balance, as an exhibitor, because obviously when you do your own programming and or you host festivals, the amount of investment that goes in from the cinema is huge.
Yeah.
And striking that balance between doing our own thing at the very localized level and also being strategic with other exhibitors and working with distribution to make the films work, the ones that are actually coming into distribution. In the UK, we've got a network called the British Film Institute Film Audience Network, and we've actually created a program which is led by exhibitors, but which is backing exhibitors that are releasing smaller titles in the UK. So it's a recognition that we recognize the job they do in terms of like opening a film and so on, but where we put our investments is making those films go to a lot more places and making sure there's lots of grassroots pots of money to do Facebook advertising, local eventization, and do that long tail, because the distributor's going to move on to the next film. But we know there's all these little cinemas that are trying to access the film, and we're there to support that. So I think it is a really good question to think about where we put the energy, what's the return on investment on those different elements of our models. Do we have any more questions?
Hello, Sasha Wieser, also sales agent. I just wanted to add to your question about the subtitles. Very often the embassies have a culture department and they finance the subtitles. They do it also for the festivals. So, and also sometimes they pay the travel costs if you want to invite a director or a producer. So it's of course depending on the country.
Are there any countries specifically that are very willing to to do the travel costs and the subtitles?
I'm not so involved in that, but but I recently it was a film from Latvia, and then the embassy paid the subtitles in Finland.
Do we have any more questions? Or I was just going to pick up on the abundance of film. So where we are now, with all these titles stacked up, waiting to be released. Do we have a question? Okay.
I prefer speaking in Spanish for me y for the rest of the people. Bueno, soy Silvino Puig, soy el coordinador del proyecto Viridiana en España. Ramiro ha comentado que es uno de los proyectos que está, lo comentó el otro día, que es uno de los proyectos que está aprobado con el apoyo de Europa Cinemas. El proyecto lo que ha hecho ha sido unir a 26 cines de distinta titularidad y se ha conseguido que cuente con el apoyo o el resorte de Europa. Lo que pretendemos es hacer una proyección al mes o varias al mes con presencia del director o de algún talent de la película en las salas de cine, en una sala en concreto, y luego compartir vía Zoom el coloquio con este director. Cinematográficamente queda muy bien, pero cuesta mucho convencer a los distribuidores, que sé que están haciendo un trabajo arduo para conseguirlo, pero cuesta mucho convencer a que esté el talent en una ciudad que no sea ni Madrid, ni Barcelona, ni Valencia. Paralelamente, yo personalmente estoy gestionando un cineclub todos los lunes en Cinelis en Valencia, y es muy fácil, bueno, es fácil, es complicado, pero no es tan difícil conseguir que un director español o un actor español esté en la sala de cine. Sé que la distribución le cuesta mucho.
To convince directors, distributors, so that directors travel to minority cities, because the spirit of Viridiana's project is that we extend the reach so that directors are present in minority cities. And a second pillar is of the Viridiana project is to so that people get to know other talents. Another aim, and I invite and encourage sales agents to get in contact with us so that to see whether together we can find another communication channel, so that these films have presence in cinema rooms in Spain. We are just starting. We will make mistakes on the way probably, but our aim midterm is to open up this initiative to other places in Europe. So this project is open to any cinema rooms throughout the territories.
So more of a pitch to the room. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting what you're saying about getting talent out to provinces. I think it's something that is probably echoed throughout the Europa Cinemas network. And I guess it's thinking of where the resources come from for this. I guess distributors have limited resources about where they can put their energy in terms of getting talent out. But also, this is, I think, where the exhibitors can sometimes come together. Like, you've secured some funding, why not have a bit of a budget within your funding in order to facilitate that travel? The money can come from different places.
I don't think it's only a money issue. We're struggling to convince our directors to dedicate more time to the. They're happy to, but they have their limits. They're the kind of personalities that they are. Sometimes they're not very marketing friendly, and it's like, for example, for LAM, it's the director's always begging us not to do video interviews because he's super shy, and it's a real struggle for him each time. So he can do a lot of radio interviews, press interviews, whatever we ask him. But with this thing, he has issues. So if we were to prepare some videos or video conferences with him, it's really a struggle, and we of course trying to do that, but it's really depending on the kind of talent you're dealing with. Some are easier to work with, and some have also more time resources to dedicate to that, because it's also that they at some point they're just exhausted, they cannot do much more. So we have to be reasonable with the request, and I think this is great, like you said, to kind of have it in one place and consolidate those efforts, because then you can use them across your network, and it's really a great idea.
And also with digital, I think there's been some really great suites of assets that have been created. Like an example in the UK, the London Film Festival actually opened up the festival in different cities across the UK and provided short video intros, which meant that, you know, the talent didn't have to travel, but we were getting this right at the point where it was getting all the press attention in London. So I think everyone that participated in that did extremely well, and it did feel like a festival. It did feel like we were connected with the talent, and so on. Do we have any questions or comments? Yeah.
Well, I have a question. Actually, I had a question that was burning it a little while already. So I have the feeling that the biggest change, not only COVID but also before, is actually more on the commercial side, the other side of the film world. But it does have some repercussions. In the Netherlands, for example, we see that the commercial chains, Pathé, Kinepolis, they actually start to program more and more art house crossover titles, Netflix titles even. And of course, on the one hand, it demands that we ask ourselves, okay, but what is our raison d'être? Why are we programming these films if also the commercial chains are doing it? But on the other side, it also has a possibly positive effect, and that is because the studios bring out fewer films in these chains. It could actually be a sort of renaissance of European cinema. How do you see this in different countries as well, or is it very Dutch, or what do you feel about it?
I mean, one small thing I'd say to just give people a second to think it through is I always see our sector, well, the independent side of the sector, as the research and development thing. And when stuff starts crossing over, for me, it's only a good thing. You know, it's like, and unfortunately, within the exhibition industry, there is this sort of competitive sense, or this sense of, you know, we find it hard to accept that when something becomes mainstreamed, and then maybe saying, well, now I'm going to go a bit more to the left. Then I'm going to go, you know, I'm going to go a bit more hardcore. I will support those films that are being bought from, rather than just then, you know, sticking with, as those films become more commercial in a way, they're going into the commercial market now. They don't need us anymore. So where else can we go? Or can we get that balance right of showing June for just 1 week or 2 weeks and then create the space? So I think we have to be careful of not being seduced by some of that work becoming more commercial. But yeah. Did anyone have any?
I can say just, as I said before, we don't know what's going to happen, and returning that VOD discussion, and I don't feel it at a threat to the cinema exhibition model, as long as all important European directors doesn't go to produce to that bigger platforms. But we don't know what's going to happen. But now I feel, at least at our point of view in Portugal, now that we are with all cinemas reopen and working 100% seats, I think if we continue doing what we are doing till now, it's going to be okay, and there will be space for this kind of European titles. And if there are more cinemas doing this, we could create these habits, and it could be great for the cinema exhibition as well.
I mean, is that something you think about a lot when you're positioning a film? You know, as the Pathés and the bigger chains are kind of taking those films. Do you think about that in terms of your distribution strategies? Like, if I give it to the commercial cinemas, that means the more like indie sites will perhaps lose. It will be kind of dissolved.
Well, we have in France some debates sometimes when you have a film like June or other movies, and the independent cinema, they want to have the film, pretending it's a director-driven movie, so they can have it the same way they can have like a documentary and it's quite harsh, because it's we understand why they want the film, because they're gonna like be sold out and make money, and they need this money to release other movies, just the way you did with Dune, I guess. But it's tricky when you have like a film like Dune, which is like released over like I don't know, like 800 prints. I don't remember the exact figure, and it's all over the cinemas in France, and you don't need to have the film in one more independent cinema in a way. I mean, it's already successful, so you don't need to eat Dune every time of the day. It's so when it's the other way around, and we have a film that is of interest, and we decide to go with a circuit, it's sometimes super difficult. We had the experience in the past to give the film to UGC for a special thing, like they wanted the film in a few cinemas, and we rarely work with UGC. I mean, for the kind of films we do, and but they were like supporting us in a way that was like quite nice, and it was not easy to say no. So we said yes, and in return we've been in a way boycotted by the other independent cinema that were like unhappy not to have the film. A film they might have never programmed in a way, but on the principle they were like not happy with it. Yeah. So it's tricky to have everybody. I mean, maybe it's specific to France. I don't know like the other countries. I mean, exhibition wise, but yeah, I think sometimes we have difficulties to communicate with, as a distributor with cinemas and different kind of cinemas.
Yeah, and I think just throwing it back to cinemas as well is, thinking about your brand and what it represents at the local level. I mean, obviously it depends on where you are. If you're the only cinema in a small town, you might need to have that mix of things. But if you're in a big city like my city, where we're completely over screens, we have multiplexes, we have an everyman chain up the road, we've got an indie cinema, hardcore indie cinema. We really think about that position. So we didn't show Dune, and we're not showing Bond, and we're doing really well with French Dispatch, so that's as far as we'll go. And that's a decision we've made. It's also for our brand. I mean, I always say, it's a bit like if you're a sort of small, organic restaurant, local neighborhood place, and then you go and sell burgers on a Saturday just because what. So I think it's just thinking about that as well in terms of our brands and our coherence in what is it we're about. And if we're really going to make those kinds of film work, like let's give them the space and the energy and get behind them. I think we're just going to end with like maybe one plea or one hope that you have. So you've made a little plea to the cinemas.
Yes, please.
But is there another, a big hope you have of how things might pan out?
I think I'm done.
You're done.
We're
done with hope.
No. It's like I think it's like we were discussing it over the last few days. That at some point we were obsessively projecting how it's gonna look like. I think it's not the best moment to be doing that. Maybe in 3 months, maybe in quarter 2, 3, 22. We're gonna know more, but at the moment I would just say that we try to be collaborative also with distributors. We sometimes lower the prices for materials. We try to provide whatever they need and make real effort for the films to work. So I think this is just has to stay the approach, so we can support each other.
And one plea from your side, or a hope?
Well, from my side, and having in mind that we have a lot of exhibitors here, I can say that maybe for those who want to try a more independent, who release more commercial titles and want to try a different kind of programming, and if you are local, try to talk with the local distributors and maybe give it a day in a week to their curation or something like that. We are talking about innovation and collaboration, so I think it's a good way to start talking with your local distributors, and above all, be proud of all the films that you exhibit, and we are going okay.
And Ramiro?
I hope to recover, to be able to recover people and the attendance, but with from a new point, not only like everything was before.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Expand.
Expand on that. What would you like to change?
I think that it's we need to rethink as in the group and in exhibition, from independent exhibition, to try to center on the on marketing from the cinema and work with distributors, and to know better our local community, and for me is the el reto,
the challenge.
The challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And Frédéric?
Two things, shortly. I think the pandemic is something temporary, I hope, but it's not the main issue. And we are in the middle of something huge, with the streamers, with everything we discussed today. And I think it's gonna change like quite soon, because you have the new players and everybody wants diversity. You can't eat the same food all the time. So today you have like the two big streamers, you have more coming up. Something will change in the near future because it's not sustainable. And when you look at history, with TV, with the DVD and everything, at the beginning it might be quite messy, but in the end we might find a system that works, and maybe those people will be soon a partner, just like the TV are today, and they still are. And a channel like Arte is quite successful in a way, having something very demanding, very arty, and it works. So that's the reason why I'm optimistic. And what I can ask and hope is based on my observation of cinemas in France. I mean, some small cities, small cities, not too small, but there are some cinemas who are super successful because they are super dynamic. Some have like associations of cinephile. And I can tell you, I'm living in Montreuil. It's like near Paris. We have Le Méliès, and it's maybe one of the best cinema in the world. But because the guy who's running the cinema, I mean, is a teacher, is a cinema lover. He travels a lot. He knows the people. He knows the director. And you have this association, Rancard, who's super like active, so they come to any premiere you can make. And I've seen, like, I can tell you in France, like some cinemas are super good. Whatever the film you show there, it works because they have like people supporting it, and they go to cinema like every week. So I think, I mean, there are ways to make money with like sometimes tiny arty movies, and it works. Yeah. And of course you have it because you have the filmmaker coming, but he comes because he knows the place as well, and you want to be there, you want to go there because you know the cinema. I mean, Montreuil is a small city, but you know the Méliès when you're a filmmaker most of the time. And I'm talking like sometimes like big filmmakers too. So I think we can always do something. It's not always easy. Sometimes we need money to do it, but I can tell you it works. And maybe it's the specific cities, but it's something everyone can try to do at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really lovely note to end on. That cinemas aren't just at the end of the box, at the end of the chain. We're not just like this box that shows film. The more proactive we can be, the stronger our relationships are with production, with the visibility we can offer. We can create spaces that are essentially discovery spaces, which, if you're a destination where people know they can come and they're going to see something interesting, it's almost like, who cares what the film is? It's just, they just know that this is a good place for them to be. So it's time for some coffee and some tea and a walk in the courtyard. So thank you so much, everybody. Please give a round of applause to our panelists.
Thank you.